This is Donnie Gupton, and I've got another phenomenal guest on the show today. And I'm going to tell you why this guest is phenomenal, because he's a one-of-a-kind guest. He's actually Steve Guest that's going to be joining me. Steve, I'm sure you've never get tired of hearing the play on the jokes of the guest at the last name, but thank you for hanging with me today, man.
A pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. So before we got this show going here, Steve and I were talking about getting together for a little Fortnite battle. You know, he's in the UK, I'm in the States here, and let us know if you guys want to drop your Fortnite username below. And we'll grind with you guys later. So both of our kids are Fortniters, so
we can have the parents versus
the parents versus the kids. There we go.
That's it.
So awesome, Steve. Thank you first off, man, for hanging late. I know it's nighttime over there, 8:00 your time. You got some kids to sleep, and I appreciate you hanging out late and chatting with me here today.
A pleasure. Thank you.
So just to dive in, man, I mean, can you give us a little background on your recruiting or your experience in the recruiting industry, how you got into the game and where we're at now?
Yeah. So I started as a buyer. So I was buying multi-million-pound frameworks. And my wife was actually working as a temp consultant, and she was doing really well. And I was seeing the sorts of earnings she was making, and kind of felt being the man, I needed to at least match that. So I went to go and do recruitment from a purchasing perspective. Went for my interview to recruit for purchasing staff. First interview went well. Second interview, I was told I didn't really fit the profile, wasn't salesy enough, wasn't confident enough, didn't come across as the type of person they were looking for. And I was gutted, to be honest. I thought I was going to get the role. I thought I'd nailed it from the first interview. Left the interview, rejected, thinking, what am I going to do? Actually went across the road to another branch or another brand within the same company, and just said, look, they won't take me on over there. Take me on, and I will spend every waking hour proving them wrong to say, actually, I can do this and I can make a go of it. That was 15 years ago. So I then became the quickest trainee to get promoted, the quickest trainee to consultant, quickest consultant to senior. I still hold the national and regional records that was set back in 2007. And it's kind of progressed. I moved on from that company, then set up a new region, new brand and division for a business that I then went on to build for 11 years. Opened 2 offices, grew it to 19 staff. £7 million turnover in sales revenue. And that was up until 2019. And then I've continued to recruit the same market for 15 years. I recruit for commercial construction permanent staff. As a kind of group and people that I've mentored along the way, it's run from anything from temporary trades and labour desks, which is high volume, low value, lots and lots of people, right the way through to senior executive appointments.
Mm-hmm.
I now run my own business with my wife. We've just taken on our first member of staff that started in January, and looking really to do the same thing again, grow a new business that's healthy, vibrant, ethical, and doing all the right things.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's awesome. So I want to circle back. So you initially got kind of hammered and told you're not qualified. Was that like, and you said, so that was kind of like your feel for the fire there to
massively. I mean, I'm one of those individuals. I'm quiet, methodical, detailed, structured, probably borderline OCD. I love a good spreadsheet. You start talking spreadsheets and I am definitely interested. I'm just that sort of person. I like to understand research, be well informed, and understand what I'm talking about. And I've never been one that's jumped in with both feet. So that can sometimes make me perhaps a little bit more, I don't know, perhaps slower to get to the point, perhaps, because I'm trying to get everything in place before I make a decision.
Right.
So I get the fact that I was probably different to 99% of recruiters. Certainly in the UK, recruiters are seen as loud, relationship building, flamboyant, confident, outwardly spoken individuals. And I was the one that perhaps was the quiet one, that would sit at the back of the room, but quietly assessing everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if anything, the rejection actually made me want it more. I think coupled with the fact that I was well paid as a buyer, and I actually halved my salary to come and be a recruitment consultant. So I already had to be really good to even make up what I was already not earning.
Right. And you went to go do the recruiting consultant to it's kind of motivation to earn what your wife was earning, and then you took a dip.
I mean that was the initial motivation, but I think then being told that I couldn't do something, or I was the wrong character profile to actually be any good at it, I think I just wanted to sit there and say, do you know what, I can do this, and actually I can do it better than the loudest person in the room. And that's really what I set out to do.
That's amazing. That's fun. So when did you make the decision that I don't want to work for anybody else, I want to start building my own dream?
I think, if I'm honest, along the way, I've always had that entrepreneurial kind of creativity to it. I've never been a yes person necessarily. And I think I like to try new things. I like to be able to investigate, trial and error, and put myself out there. I've learned that over the years, to kind of push past your comfort zones. And I think where I worked at a company called Fast Track Management Services, and I was pretty much left alone for 11 years. I was given the autonomy to grow the 2 offices and the 2 regions. And it worked really well because I could sink and swim by the decisions I made. I learned a lot, and all credit to the MD that supported me, because it was down to me to make a difference. But I think it had just got to a point where the MD that I'd always worked with had decided that he was going to go off in a different direction. The company were bringing in 2 new directors that were very corporate in terms of their setup. It just perhaps wasn't me. And I think I'd learned to almost move away from that corporate type branded recruitment agency, where it's very much about KPIs and lots of justification. And whilst I know that's got its place, I kind of wanted to focus on the service deliverables and perhaps less so on the KPI element, albeit there's still KPIs to what I do. I still very much work to KPIs I was set back in 2006, but I choose to work to them. Right. I'm not kind of told I have to work to. There's a difference. And I think having the ability to be creative at the moment, for me, the biggest thing we can be doing is about personal branding. It's about being on people's timelines. It's about showing people the whites of your eyes, building that trust, showing your ethics and your core values. Certainly in the UK, many corporate recruiters, you wouldn't be able to do that, because you have to toe the corporate line. You have to be the company brand, not the personal brand. Right. And I think there's elements now where personal brand in many ways is perhaps taking over the kind of company brand. They either have to be in tune with each other, or they have to be distinctly separate. Yep. And I think having a balance of the 2 actually carries more power. That's funny you bring that up. I was actually on a call with somebody today talking about exactly that, where they were going everything towards more of that corporate kind of company feel. And I said, that's good. But I said, I think the biggest opportunity now is that personal brand, because people connect with people, and with social media now, it's a whole different game. So it's changed the whole landscape. And I think even when I go back so I work for Hayes PLC, big corporate, well-known recruitment brand. And they always trained you when you first started that if you go and sit in front of a client, and a client says, okay, I have these recruiters call me every day, they come out and meet me, they say the same thing in terms of what they do to find the best candidates. What makes you any different? Why should I use you over all the other options? And we were always taught the best answer to say to that, the difference is me. I'm the difference, because I'm the one that's going to go and find the best candidates. I'm the one that's going to put the effort in, the work in, all the background calls and the various efforts to find you the people no one else can find. So even in the early days, I was always the difference. So even now that you've got social media and elements that complement the activity, the difference is still you. Right. You as a recruiter are where the service and the process falls down or actually does really well. It's not the company branding that does well. Right. it might get the opportunities in, but it's not going to fill them if the recruiter doesn't do the work.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think I come from a traditional cold calling recruitment background. So I'm used to hundreds of calls every day. You keep going until you find the opportunity, and then you go and find the typical candidate. And over the years, I've had to find a blend of, I still cold call now. I still enjoy that element, but actually I get a lot more inbound activity because I'm strong on personal branding as well.
Right.
And I think having the power of everything actually complements it all, because you as an individual don't get to choose how your audience decides to contact you.
That's such a good point, man. I think that's such a good point. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that kind of think about like making a choice of like, well, I have to either be on the phone or social media, or it's, not to spread yourself thin and be bad at, not good at anything, but yeah.
It's a balance, and it's about incorporating every aspect of business development into all the parts that you do. Because I've had a client, I'll give you a story. So I've recruited the same market for a long time. And I was very rigorous and process in how I worked. So I would call a client every month for an update, even if they weren't recruiting. So it'd be a 4 to 6 week catch-up call. And I would do that religiously. It would be built into the way that I worked. It'd be built into the CRM. So a prompt would pop up. You need to ring this client. I rang a client, the managing director of a contractor, for 8 years with no response, no comments back. I didn't get a response from email, from phone calls. I used to drop into reception, into the offices, and ask to speak to them, and they were never available, never in, never saw them. 8 years of ringing every 4 to 6 weeks. After 8 years, I thought I need to do something different. I'm going to write them a handwritten letter. And I did that, and it went to the managing director, who then wrote back to me, inviting me in for a meeting. And he'd never got the messages, because he'd said, don't put any recruitment agencies through to me, I'm not interested. He didn't respond to emails because his PA stopped the emails because it was a recruitment agency. So in actual fact, in 8 years, he never knew I was even trying to contact him.
Right.
The handwritten letter got through the gatekeeping, as you might call it.
Right.
And that taught me a valuable lesson. Firstly, it told me I never give up, and you just carry on and you try different things. Probably not 8 years worth of trying, but what it also says is the audience responds to something they wish to respond to, not what you expect them to respond to. So if you've got clients that don't answer the phone to you, then you should be trying something different. If not, you should be trying all of it until you find the common ground where you can communicate.
Yeah, I think you make a huge point with that, Steve. And I think that it's, a lot of people start to tell stories around, each one of those things, phone, snail mail, as you call it, or you start looking at social media and people are like, well, I don't do Facebook because that's my personal place, or that's where people do personal. And it's like, once you, I think, eliminate all of the stories or names that you're supposed to, LinkedIn's for professional and Facebook's for business, and you just look at it as a place to connect with people where they want to be met at, is really where it's at. I think
completely. One of the things I say to my kind of mentees is, you've got to hang out where your audience predominantly hang, whether that's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be. You need to make sure you have a presence wherever the majority of your market are. You don't get to choose which platform that is.
You're right. 100%.
You just need to spend more time where they are, and you need to understand your market, and as you'd class it, your avatar, as to where you need to adopt your marketing.
Yep.
And I think there's too many recruiters that will say, yeah, but I've always been told I should be using LinkedIn or I should be using Facebook. Well, it depends who's told you that.
Right.
And whether they worked your market or recruited in your market. And even then, it's still about consistency. It's just about keep showing up so you become that face. I put a post out on LinkedIn this week. I think it was Tuesday. So I had a client. He was a number one connection on my LinkedIn. I've never spoken to them. I'm not even sure how they became a first class connection on my LinkedIn, but they were there. And I got a message probably about 8, 9 o'clock at night saying, Steve, can we have a chat tomorrow? I've got a requirement. So I said, yeah, let's have a chat at 2 o'clock the next day. And he was moving jobs. He needed a quantity surveyor, asked if I could help. And I said, just out of interest, why did you send me a message? He said, because you're always on my timeline. I always see your face. I've looked at your profile. You've recruited the commercial market for 15 years. Because you keep posting, I know you're busy. So you're actively working with the right candidates and filling the right positions. Why wouldn't I contact you?
Right.
And that's exactly what social media is.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think from a recruitment perspective, recruitment consultants are always looking for, I suppose, what you'd call it a win. They're always looking for a monetary gain from a placement or fulfilling a requirement. And I think with social media, because you don't necessarily always get that instant like or that instant comment, people suddenly think, actually, this isn't working. I'm going to do something else.
Right.
Certainly in the UK, the problem with putting a post out and maybe, let's say, I'm looking for a quantity surveyor to start work on Monday, and these are the things I'm looking for. You won't have candidates or potential candidates comment because they don't want to tell the world that they're on the lookout. And you're not going to have clients comment because they don't want to tell every recruiter on the planet that they've got a requirement. So nobody interacts. The interaction comes off the platform. So it's direct messages, it's emails, it's phone calls, but it doesn't get recorded. So people say, yeah, but you've got no engagement on that post. I was like, I don't need engagement. I had 5 calls and I've arranged 3 interviews and I've filled the position.
Yep.
It works. But people stop because they want the likes. They want I suppose, the identification of their post to work.
Mm-hmm.
They work off.
I think, we align in a lot of these things. Because I say the same thing to people on my program, and it's exactly that. Is like, well, I first asked them, like, how much of my stuff did you engage with? Because most of my clients aren't the ones that are liking and commenting on my stuff. They're just not. And it's not to say that that's not obviously 100% true, but especially in the recruitment market, it's like, well, what candidate's going to go say, yeah, I'm interested in that role. I'm still employed. So don't worry about my other employer. And, then you start looking at the sophistication of the hiring decision maker. They might not be the people that are engaging with content all the time, but they're seeing it. And like you said, they're not going to want to. So I always call it like the dopamine rush, right? They kind of take what you're used to from your traditional social media and in kind of chasing likes and comments. And then you go do this in the business world, and that has nothing really to do with it. I mean, of course you want to see engagement from a standpoint of trying to get more views so that you can impact more eyeballs, but that's not the indicator. And I just love hearing that. Yeah.
I teach and coach. I do what I call the 70-20-10 rule. So I always say you should do a couple of posts a day, certainly on LinkedIn, 1 in the morning, 1 at lunchtime, every day, Monday to Friday. So therefore you're doing 10 posts a week, and you should do 70%, 20%, 10%. So 7 posts are about your market, your sector, your business, what you want to be known for, what you want to attract in terms of your clients and candidates. 2 posts or 20% should be something about you as an individual. So what makes you human, what makes you relatable, what makes you engaging so that people want to associate with you and see how you progress. So it could just be your personal journey or your development. And then you have 10% or 1 post a week, which is just a trending topic.
Mm-hmm.
So try and avoid religion and politics if you can, but trending topics that will gain engagement, or questions that just basically, certainly in here, around the UK, and a really engaging post is we love our cups of tea. So you can put a post out saying, which color do you prefer as a cup of tea? And you go from the milky white right to what we call builder's tea, which would be the dark brown tea. And you number them and you get people to answer. I got one of my colleagues to do that a few weeks ago, and his post went crazy because we all love to say what an ideal cup of tea is.
Right.
The actual post is irrelevant. The actual, I suppose, results, you don't need to know which is the best coloured cup of tea.
Right.
But actually what it does is it drives lots of people to your post, and it drives lots of people to your profile, gains that engagement. So when you put your 70% of market posts out, it's engaging the same people.
Yep.
And you're connecting with people that engage with your posts. If and get into that habit every week, the consistency brings your market to you. And I think that's the most important thing. You're not going to come up with the next viral post tomorrow.
Right.
But keep turning up.
Yeah, the consistency is the biggest point that you can make, and it's funny how people, kind of tell the story that. In fact, I was talking to somebody today. They're like, "Well, we like to post once a week. We just want to make sure it's really, really good." And I said, I just being 100% direct and honest. I said, "You're leaving a lot on the table by doing that." I said, I always ask people all the time, tell me my training that you went to start to finish, and tell me everything I said. Tell me my guides that I've created that you've read, top to bottom. Tell me the last video that you've watched of mine from front to back. You haven't. Why are you on the phone with me? Because I'm here more often than most, right? Because you've seen my message. Yeah. You've seen it come from a different angle. I said, so if you're doing it once a week, I said, you're touching a portion of your audience, and there's so much more out there. I said, think about the biggest brands in the world. And you think of Apple and Target. And I did a training a couple of weeks ago about the Toyota-thon. Over here, we have the Toyota-thon commercial, and it's like every segment on TV, you're just getting pounded. Well, it's repetition. That's what brands do, And I think that's where the ego, when you're doing personal branding, your ego kind of comes into play of like, well, I don't know if I want that much attention, and I don't want people to be like rubbed away. It's like, no, you don't have a choice anymore to be present and be consistent.
It's the ability to keep showing up.
Yep.
And my view, I read a book a number of years ago called The Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley. Okay. It's a great book, and it just basically talks about how you become the go-to person. And it's about creating things that people can find about you, they can read about you. There's articles, there's podcasts, there's various things, and you become that key person of influence. So my view in terms of me, even from the days before social media was a thing, it was to become recognized, so much so that you become the person people talk about.
Right.
And that could just become from, all the market movers, all your clients, all your candidates. You've placed most of them, you've worked with most of them, you've met them. So who are they naturally going to talk about? It's going to be you. So if you can then still do that and promote from a social media perspective to keep turning up on someone's timeline, you're further enhancing the fact that you are that person.
Yep.
One of the main reasons behind writing my book, when I first had the idea to write it, it came from the Key Person of Influence book. But the idea was, I wanted my book to almost become my business card. So I wanted to be able to become the recruiter that wrote the book. Because at the time, there was probably only maybe 5 or 6 recruitment books out there. So I thought if I could do something where my clients and candidates start to think, oh, Steve Guest, he's the guy that wrote the Top Biller book. I would stand out from other recruiters because I've done something slightly different. And that was the whole kind of thought process, because I wanted to become that key person.
Yeah, I think the credibility and the perception from the marketplace on the outside is just, it's where it's at. That's where you build that expertise, the influence, like you're saying. And there's plenty of it to go around. I think that some people might look at you and go, oh, well, yeah, he's already the influencer in the commercial construction space. And you're going to say, yeah, of course I am. But the reality is there's probably still enough for somebody else to come, and there's plenty of business to go around and still have the same type of an impact, to the marketplace.
I think it's people getting up and doing it though. That's the tough bit.
Yep.
The easy part of all of that is to say, well, it's already been done, I can't do that.
Right.
And you move on to something different, and then it's like, well, they've done that, so I can't really do that either now. Yeah. Actually, everybody's different. Everybody has their own unique way. So just go and do it.
Yeah. No, I love
it. Go and make it happen and see how it lies.
Yeah. For those of you that are listening live right now, give Steve a little love if you're enjoying this. I got a couple questions that have come up, Steve. So Lou Petto asked, Steve, does niche make one rich? What's your take on that?
Okay. So if I paint a picture, when I first started recruiting for commercial roles, when I worked for Hayes, I did commercial construction positions. I had a postcoded area. So I had a geographical niche, a market niche, and I only could work with contractors that had the letters A to M. So I knew my market like the nth degree. I knew the one-man small businesses right the way through to the big corporate companies. When I chose to leave Hayes and set up the new office for the new company, the big selling point for me was I had the whole of the UK. And I thought, happy days, if I can bill so well here in such a small, minute market, I could bill so much more if I had the whole of the country to do it. And actually what happened was my service got diluted. I ended up trying to fill roles at either end of the country with companies I didn't necessarily know, with candidates I didn't know locally were any good or not. And actually the service got worse. And for probably the first 6 months, I wasn't as good a recruiter. And what I ended up doing was actually bringing it back to make sure it was so defined what I recruited for that I just knew when somebody moved, I knew where the holes were. When somebody, and you could almost follow it around the market.
Right.
So yeah, I would say the better defined, the better you have as an ability to then move with the market. You can always start off really small and grow it and get bigger and bigger as you get to know it. But I would say be specialized, be focused, be super targeted, and then build outwards.
Love it. Love it. And we got Michael Kenyon comment on here. He's great content. Love his book. Quasi had a question for you on here. It says, please share your first client hunt experience as an individual starter.
If I go back, actually, I was in recruitment for about 9 months before I left and then ended up being a buyer. And it was 3 months I had to spend in a different location. And all it was cold calls and lead hunting. So I had to do 100 cold calls a day. And the idea was you had to find 10 to 15 leads to then pass to a consultant in the office. I think they were the targets. I'm going back about 18 years. I remember my first lead was actually with a chicken farm, and it was an accounts assistant in the middle of nowhere. But it was ruthless. It was ruthless. I was recruiting for accountancy staff, and you didn't have any let up because you knew you had to make 100 calls. I don't know whether you've read the book Go for No.
No, I've never read that one.
Go for No is a great book. If ever you're sat there and you're constantly rejected and you're struggling to find that next call that gives you the opportunity, Go for No flips it on its head on the basis that you're going for no to get past it quickly to get to the next yes.
Right.
And in effect, the no is just not yet. It's just a timing thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of changed my thought process on the basis I've got to make 100 calls. Let's just get through them. So you deal with the rejection because you know the next one's going to be a yes.
Right.
Does that answer the question? It's kind of a roundabout.
Yeah. I'll see if he gives us some feel free to comment back on that, Quasi there. Michael followed up with a question. If you use a service like Discover.org and have prospects no mobile number, but you haven't connected yet, would you use it?
Yeah. I mean, my first point of call is always a phone call. So if I've got a mobile number, that is me ahead of the game. If I've got emails and LinkedIn messages and in-mails, whilst that is okay, my view on that is once you've sent the message, you can only ask the questions that are in the message and the control has been passed over to the other person.
Right.
I'd much rather start a conversation and have some control of where the conversation goes. And you can continue asking the open questions and almost probe a little bit further.
Mm-hmm.
The trouble with emails and everything else is once you've sent the message, it's gone.
Right.
And then you sat there thinking, well, what do I do now? Do I call them? Do I email them because they didn't respond to the message? Do I send them another message? Is that going to be rude? Am I chasing them too much? You sat there reliant on someone coming back to you. And I don't want to give that control away.
Yep. Got it. Love that feedback. Hopefully that answers. Michael, feel free to ask a follow-up question on that one. I'm curious. I mean, in your experience, given the fact that you're successful on the phone and then successful with the inbound, do you notice a different quality of prospect of somebody that's kind of a cold call versus somebody who's an inbound?
Yeah. There's definitely a difference. And I think because I suppose I'm used to copious amounts of cold calls, it doesn't surprise me if I speak to someone who doesn't want the phone call and perhaps is rude. I've rang them at the wrong time. It's not relevant. They're not recruiting. They hang up the phone. It's not going anywhere. I can fine with that. And it's not like it would labor in my thoughts because, oh no, that person didn't want to speak to me. But I was always taught it takes 7 touch points to build a working relationship. So my view is if I'm just making cold calls, I've already decided I've got to speak to that person 7 times before they're going to give me an opportunity. So the first no is fine. The second no is fine. And it can keep going until I get to 7. And then I'm thinking, okay, where do I go here?
Right.
So social media reduces the time it takes to build the relationship. Because if I make the cold call and it's a no, and then I put out 10 posts over the week and that person's connected with me and they start seeing some video content, they see that I'm recruiting for these roles, they see I'm working with their competitors. By the following time I get to call, the 7 touch points have been taken up because they've built that level of like, know, and trust, and they've seen what I'm doing. I can go to networking events, for example, and because my social media content is so consistent, I can walk into a networking meeting and not know individuals that will come up to me and just start talking, chatting away as if they've known me forever. And I'm stood there thinking, I don't know who you are. And I have to interrupt to say, I'm really sorry, I don't know who you are. And their comments will be, oh, I see you on social media all the time. I kind of feel like I know you.
Yep.
and that's the difference. If it was just cold calls and no social media and no inbound type marketing, I would still be having to call, and they certainly wouldn't approach me because they would have no way of knowing who I was other than the voice, if that makes sense. So inbound, if your market's coming to you, the call's softer, it's warmer. They've got a need because they're speaking to you. It's not you having to sift out what the requirement is.
Right.
And I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I mean, everything I get is all inbound. I don't do any more outbound efforts for myself personally. And it's because of that. It's like, I want to only speak with people that are qualified, know, like, and trust, seen my stuff. And I think that's obviously there's a difference between me selling a coaching services versus, a recruiting business, but with my clients that see the same thing, it's just much more power. You're much more leveraged,
Massively. I completely agree. Yeah. I suppose the cold call element for me these days comes from if I know there's a requirement somewhere, or I get a lead to say that company's looking for a quantity surveyor. I don't know if they're seeing my content.
Right. It's what
so the best form. Well, the best form of understanding is to give the person a call to say, I understand you're looking for this type of person. This is what I've done for 15 years. I can help you. That's the quickest and easiest route in. I wouldn't look at it on the basis that I'll connect with them on social media and then hope they see my posts to then respond inbound. Right. I would take it at the forefront that I need to speak to them. So I'd make the call. And that's why I think having a balance of being able to do social media and actually taking action and calling someone.
Yep.
Because your leads will naturally generate from doing your marketing anyway.
Right. Well, like you're saying, it's a touch point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, you'll have clients that aren't on social media. You'll have clients that don't respond to marketing.
Right.
But you'll have clients that will pick up the phone and speak to you. I work with construction companies. So some of my companies that I work with still use fax machines.
Right.
and they certainly won't be on LinkedIn if they're doing civil and groundwork projects down in the depths of
scrolling their feed in between drilling a big huge hole or something.
It's just the nature. Maybe it's the nature of the markets that you deal with.
Right.
But I respect every company and every contractor, and everyone works differently. And I still respect the fact that people will respond to different ways of working, and I have to be able to adapt to whatever that might be.
Right. Well, I think one thing, kind of to circle back, just as I'm talking with you here, one thing and you mentioned it before, you love spreadsheets, but it's, it seems like you're really committed to your process. right? And I think that's a huge thing, no matter what it is. It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to set out, I know it's going to take 7 touch points. I'm not telling myself any stories. I'm not trying to figure out anything else. I'm just going to go make sure through discipline that I'm going to make sure that in best of my control, I'm going to touch this person 7 times.
Yeah. Everything we do as a sales perspective will have a ratio or a number behind it. And I'm used to that. I'm used to when I was buying and working on multi-million-pound frameworks, I was buying gunmetal fittings to connect pipe works under streets and roads. And I would go down to the raw materials to understand the price of the product that we should be paying. So, I mean, it's really detailed stuff. So I came into recruitment and I could see lots of pain points in the market. Certainly in the UK, there is a poor level of service. Recruiters have a bad name here on the basis that we're not necessarily well trusted or well liked. Sometimes we're seen as a necessary evil. There was lots of feedback in that recruiters would make calls, they'd make promises, they would register vacancies, and then the client would never hear from them again. They wouldn't get any CVs. If they did get CVs, they weren't very good. But it's all really basic stuff. So if I said, right, I'm going to go and find you 3 CVs for this position, I'm going to give you a call on Thursday with a market update. You'll have the CVs by Friday midday, and then we'll arrange interviews for the following week. That was my process. So I used to book them in to my calendar so they had a timed call set. The CVs would be with them by midday Friday. If they weren't, I'd ring them to tell them why. And everything had a step-by-step approach. The ability of having that slightly different thought process and way of working was the bit that made me different to everybody else. Every other recruiter, certainly when I started, and it's still very true today, and in the UK, they're relationship builders. They are outwardly spoken. They are flamboyant. They're confident. They're good with people skills, and they're good on the phone, and they can sell you something. But actually, quite often, they'll leave a bit of a trail of destruction behind them because there's no process, plan, or reason behind how they work and what they do.
Right.
So I have a clear plan, a clear focus, a clear strategy that I've worked to for 15 years.
Right.
And I tailor it and tweak it and bring in those kind of 1% marginal gains to the point that I know how many sales calls I need to make, how many vacancies I need to register, how many interviews I need to arrange in a week to achieve a certain financial goal. I know what my average fees are. I know what my best years are, what my best months are, all the elements that fit together to say, actually, if I make 20 sales calls a day, let's say I make 21 for that 1% marginal gain. If I make 1 extra call a day, I'm going to make 261 extra calls a year, which is like, what's that? 13 more days work than I would do if I just did the 20. And it's having that thought process to say, where can I make those little minimal changes to actually improve my return, improve the number of placements, and improve my credibility.
The 80-20 principle.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. If you understand your stats, you can measure it and you can improve it. If you go into work every day and you just think, you know what, I'm just going to make loads of calls today and see how I get on, it's not going to get you anywhere. You might have a really good day, but then the following day you sat there thinking, how many calls did I make yesterday? Oh, I'll just try and do the same again today. But you have no idea or no rhyme or reason why you're doing what you do. And I think that's why many recruiters get stuck with KPIs. There's so many KPIs in recruitment that it's almost detrimental to the service because quite often they're not the right KPIs that you should be looking at to get the best return. You should pick the ones that work, remove the rest, and concentrate on the ones that you need to do. And I think because of the way my brain works, because I'm spreadsheet savvy, because I like to understand what I'm doing, it just makes sense to me. And I've sat in front of recruiters, don't get me wrong, and they've gone, what? What are you talking about? Why would I need to do that? I'm like, because that's how you make improvements. That's how you're better this year than you were last year. That's how you can have a proper structure. You can have a proper system, and then you can scale it because everybody's working to the same process.
Right. Well, it's almost like, it's almost if you're not measuring it, how do you know what you're growing? It's almost like going to the gym. It's like going to the gym and working out, but not keeping an actual notebook.
Yeah.
You don't know if last week you did 100 pounds on dumbbell press or 95. And if you're trying to improve, you might want to have that game plan.
Yeah.
It's funny how all these
Yeah.
things in life usually kind of turn into some sort of process commitment, some sort of measurable that actually impacts a result,
Yeah.
rather than keeping a stat to keep a stat, like you're saying.
Me and the wife have a discussion every year. So every December between Christmas and New Year, it's kind of planning time for the next year. So I'll break it down into things like family, finance, work. She'll do all the nice stuff. So the spontaneous stuff, the holidays, where to spend money, all the nice things you want in life. And I'm like, no, let's put that over there. Let's save that over here. We need to do this here.
Yeah.
And it's good because we've got that balance where it just kind of works. If it was down to me, I'd invest everything and make sure it's the long-term goal.
Right.
We're done for the next 30 years. Whereas
right.
I've got to learn to live a little bit per day. So I'm told.
Yeah. Yep. That's good. I've got a similar type of relationship at home. Where I'm always some that keeps me grounded for sure. You wanted to talk about your book a little bit.
Okay.
And Top Biller. I mean, what what is kind of covered in that book? I haven't had a chance to read it myself yet, but
so the book was really a story of, I suppose, why I was different. So it talks about the fact that I was initially rejected. I've used that as a motivator. I've progressed really well, and then I became the consultant I became. And it's a story of various things that I implemented that perhaps made me different as a recruiter. It talks about various scenarios. There's some stories in there that are, I suppose, funny anecdotes of what's happened over the years. One of the main motivations for writing it was I wanted to empower and I suppose motivate people that were perhaps not the recognized normal consultant. And I actually just wanted to show that, look, you don't need to be the loudest. You don't need to be the one that rings that bell every time you get a placement and high fives everyone around the office to actually be good at recruitment. You just need to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver on. Work hard, get to know everyone in your market, and be ethical, honorable, and deliver on service. If you do all of that, you'll be successful. So the idea behind the book was very much that. I wanted to write it because not many recruiters write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to create something that was relatable. There's a lot of recruitment books, or there's the recruitment books that I'd read prior to writing Top Biller are very textbook heavy.
Right.
And it's about a defined process that was probably written very well by a coach or a recruitment mentor, but probably hadn't recruited for 5 or 10 years. And because I'm still actively recruiting, I wanted something that was, I suppose, genuine, honest, relatable, and written by a recruiter that is still doing it day to day now.
That's amazing. What's the feedback that when did you launch it officially?
So it published November 2019.
Okay.
I remember going to an event. There was about 80 people in the room, and the person conducting the event just said, it was a kind of off the cuff question, how many people in the audience have wrote a book? And there was probably about 8 or 9 hands that went up. And he said, and keep your hands up if you've sold more than 50 copies. And all the hands went down. And I was sat there in the second row thinking, I've only just started writing this. I don't want to just sell 50 copies.
Right.
And it probably put a little bit of the fear factor in. It took 18 months to write. There was a 6-month gap in between where work took over. And I'd got to the Christmas and thought, I need to get this done. How am I going to do it? Because it's tough writing a book, and it takes up time and thought. And I ended up setting my alarm at 5 o'clock every morning. I'd drive to the office, get there between 5 and 5:30, and I'd have an hour and a half before the consultants arrived. And I just gave myself questions, scenarios, ideas to write about, and I'd just write. And I did that for about 7 or 8 months to get the book finished. I hired someone to help me get it published and gave them a date because it then made me accountable to make sure I got it complete.
Right.
And that was probably one of the best decisions I made because I knew I had to get it done.
Right.
So it published November 2019. I think by April or May, so 6 months later, it's sold in 28 countries. I think it's now sold in 42 countries, which is crazy. It's the highest reviewed recruitment book on Amazon. I think it's about 225 reviews now.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Average review is 4.7 out of 5. The feedback has been astronomical. It's been a really humbling journey. I never thought in my wildest dreams it would do as well as it has done. And I've enjoyed the whole process. It's connected with me with so many people. And I think writing the book has helped elevate my personal brand to a whole new level.
Yeah.
As I think we've spoke before, I developed my 12-week recruitment mastery program, which I launched in June of last year. That came off the back of, obviously the book had done well. The UK went into lockdown the end of March last year. And I'd seen on my LinkedIn timeline that lots of recruiters here were placed on furlough, weren't working, were sat at home, feeling insecure, unsure of what to do, not knowing what was around the corner. And I put a post out on LinkedIn and said, if you're this recruiter that needs a cuddle, needs a laugh, needs a cry, needs a rant, whatever it might be, I'm going to clear out my diary next week. You can book in for a 30-minute Zoom call and we'll just have a chat. And if I'm honest, I thought I'd probably get 10, 12 people book in, and it would be old school friends. It would be people ringing, checking in just to have a bit of a laugh and a joke. And I didn't really hold too much expectation. It ended up being 62 recruiters. And these were recruiters I didn't know, hadn't met before. And it was global. There was consultants from Switzerland, Japan, China, Singapore, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand. And it was a phenomenal week. But what it taught me was all the problems, all the hurdles, all the situations recruiters get themselves in are the same globally. And it kind of changed my thought process in terms of how I could potentially add value back,
right? Which
is where the recruitment mastery program actually came from. And now we're just about to launch the third run of it. And it's had recruiters from all over the world, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually stemmed from, I think the pandemic helped in a way because people were sat at home.
Right.
So it gave me a way of potentially adding some value back. But actually the launch of the book is the part that opened it up probably more globally, because people recognized that there was some substance behind having a conversation with me.
Right. Yeah. Well, you had that authority presence, whether you wanted it or not. That's
it. And
doing it. Yeah.
I think whenever you do anything like that, writing the book, it could have been critiqued, it could have been ridiculed, it could have been the worst recruitment book on the planet. Yeah. And it could have just nosedived. And I'm sat there thinking, take it off the shelves. Don't let anyone buy another copy.
Right.
It could quite happily have gone that way. I'm not a trained writer.
Right.
And unfortunately, it didn't happen like that. But actually writing it has opened up so many more avenues, because it's given it a whole kind of new dimension. I'm partway through writing the second book, which will be the follow-up to it. And that should be published, I hope, in the next couple of months. And I'm genuinely excited for that one as well, because it's just a different take to it.
Yeah, man, that's really inspiring. I really love listening to this story here of you kind of starting from an underdog, and everything that you're doing is all, you're constantly chasing, constantly trying to improve, and you're busting through hurdles left and right to, go after what you want without fear of failure. Yeah. And I think that's where so many people get held back, is the story in their head of what's going to happen, and then, well, I'm not going to go ahead and write that book. And it's amazing how you're always pushing ahead and just staying committed to getting that work done.
We as humans, I think, have huge self-limiting beliefs.
Yep.
And we're always in that self-preservation mode, because we don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to be told we're not good at something, and we certainly don't want to be rejected. And even if I look at the last 9 or 10 months, there has been situations where I was asked, probably about April time, to do a 30-minute live guest talk in front of 2,500 recruitment businesses And I'd never done a live talk. I'd never done any guest speaking. I certainly wasn't in a position where I thought I could stand up and hold and talk for 30 minutes. But the email came through late on a Friday. I'd had a couple of bourbons and ginger ale watching the telly, feeling a little bit more confident than I perhaps normally would. The email come through. I replied, said, yes, I'd love to, while my head was going, don't do it, don't do it. And then I spent the whole weekend panicking about it, but did it anyway. I remember because we were in lockdown, so I had to record it at home. So it was a recorded 30 minutes that actually went out live. I had to get my wife to take our two boys on I think it was car park bingo, out in the car, go around all the roads I think I gave her an hour timeline. And I had 45 minutes to really record a half an hour talk. And I did it. And then since then, you just do things like podcasts, Facebook lives, live videos, interviews. I've gone live in the US a few times now. And this is all relatively new. It's only happened since April last year. I had people interviewed live into my Facebook group a couple of weeks ago. And for the majority of them, it was their first live as well.
Right.
But they've gone through my program where I've pushed them to just push outside your comfort zone. Just give it a go. If it falls flat on its face, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You've had a go. It's gone wrong. So next time, put what went wrong right and have another go. And I think even if you think back to your school days, certainly my school days, I was always frightened of getting something wrong. I was always frightened of failure. I was always frightened of getting 9 out of 10, not 10 out of 10. And you're not passing your GCSEs or your A levels. And it's almost born into you from an early age not to fail.
Yep.
And I think you come out into the business world and you think the same. I can't do that. What if somebody says this? Or what if they don't agree with what I've said? And I just think you've just got to just try it. Obviously, don't do something that's detrimental or wrong.
Right.
But actually, if it's going to push you and push your self-development, just give it a go.
Yeah. Yeah. What is, I don't know who says, there's probably several successful people that say it, but like, you say yes first and then you figure it out, case in point with your whole
100%.
Like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And then holy shit, like I got to figure out what I'm going to deliver now.
But all of that is not my character trait.
Right.
It's not at all. My character trait is not to jump in and say yes. And I've had to learn that. I've had to develop it. I've had to practice it.
Right.
And it still scares me now every time I just say yes.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather say yes and then worry about it for a few days and then think logically, okay, actually, how am I going to do this?
Right. Right. Well, that's how you up level, right? As a person, that's how you don't grow, obviously, staying in a comfort zone, No. And it's funny that people think that like it stopped. I mean, for me, every time I do one of these lives, there's always a little bit of butterflies before I go live. Always, every time.
Yeah.
And people like, you do these things like 2-3 times a week. How do you, it's because I'm a human.
Yeah.
Because
and it's live.
Every time I always press play. And I remember the first time I went live on Facebook, that's what I did. I'm just like, forget it. Boom, just click live. And it's like, well, shit, can't turn back now. I've got to start talking. And, so much of that is really where the commitment to the process, just saying yes. And then that's where the up level happens. And then, there's really not a whole lot bad that can happen, except for you usually find out who you wouldn't want to work with. Because when the assholes show up, it's not anybody I would want to work with anyways. Yeah.
But they'll be there whether you do it or not anyway.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
They might as well say hello to you.
Yep. Exactly.
I remember when video was starting to become a thing, social media video. And I reckon I found excuses not to do it for about 18 months, probably even nearly 2 years. And I remember getting up one morning, I was driving to our head office, which was about 2 hours away. And I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk and Crush It on the stereo. And there's a part in there where he says, if you're one of those people that just procrastinate and you always say you're going to do it, but you never get up off your ass and go and do it, you just need to get up off your ass and go and do it. It's something along them lines. And I parked up at the head office, got out of the car and did a 30-second video that went straight out that just said, hi, I'm Steve Guest. There's no value and content in this video whatsoever. It's me getting over a personal hurdle. I'm just putting myself out there. Let me know what you think. That was it. And obviously there's a few people saying that was rubbish. You shouldn't hold the camera that way. It was shaking. Try and get it on a stand. Your shirt doesn't match your jumper. And then there was someone that put a few posts down. Great video, Steve. Now I challenge you to do 10 videos in 10 days. And I was like, and that was another, okay, challenge accepted. And then I worried about it afterwards. But it set me on a journey of doing 10 videos with 10 bits of content across 10 days. It was all about me. It's about my personal development. But it got me over the worry of having to do them. It got me over the hurdle of not knowing what to do because you have to think of the content. And actually, I owe a lot to that person. That's going back probably 3 years, 4 years maybe. But that in that very moment, it's the bit that actually made me comfortable with, I don't really care what people say.
Right.
I really don't. I'll put it out. It'll be 75% perfect, if that. I've got my message across. I might have stumbled across a few words. It won't be ideally perfect. I might have a hair out of place going the other way. It's just got to go out. And once it's gone, it's gone. Yeah. And you move on.
Yeah. I mean, there's such a journey on video, you know. I mean, I think I've probably shot a couple hundred videos at this point, all the way back from when I was even before being in this industry. I was doing videos in the floor covering, and I modeled myself off of Gary Vee back in 2008, though, years ago when he was doing Wine Library TV. That's Gary Vee, if you didn't know that. But so I started Flooring My Life TV. I was in the flooring industry with my dad. And gosh, if anybody needs some inspiration, go YouTube Flooring My Life TV. Holy shit, that was awful. But the thing about it is I was generating a fortune from it. Our family's business was growing and exploding because I was the first one to adopt it, put myself out there. And you know, the positive from it, you know, far outweighed the negative. And even to this day, you know. You know, so
people don't do it, do they?
No.
It's still about different. I read a stat the other week. I hope I get this right because it's obviously my memory playing with me, but only 1% of users on LinkedIn actually post content.
Yeah, I've seen the same stat.
1%. If 1%, that 1% gets something like 900 billion impressions per week. That's huge.
It's huge.
Why are only 1% posting? What are the others doing?
Yeah. Well, that's
just by simply putting some content out, you're already part of the 1%.
Yeah. No, it's insane that there's that much of a
it's crazy.
People that still haven't fully jumped on board. There's so much opportunity. It's still like almost an untapped market, if you will, you know?
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Steve, I want to be respectful of your time, man. We've had a good conversation. We've gone an hour and it certainly hasn't felt like that on my end.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
You know, I was going to use the word characteristics, but going back into you being the underdog and kind of being defined, you know, is not, the characteristics of the recruiter. I mean, what would you say are the top disciplines that a successful recruiter needs to have?
For me, I would say plan, structure, and deliver on what you say you're going to deliver on.
Yep.
You get that right, generally everything else will you can manage it as you go. I think that's what separates most recruiters now from anyone else. You become reliable, you become consistent, you become the person that people want to speak to because you know you're going to get a result.
Right. Love it, man. That's great. Great advice. Great feedback. Where can everybody, you know, find you, find your book, you know, and keep the conversation going with Steve? Yeah,
I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. So that's probably the easiest place. The book is available. I think it's 7,000 bookstores worldwide. So Amazon is your best first bet. But it's sold in so many different places. You can get an ebook, you can get audio, and you can get paperback.
Beautiful. So those of you to listen, make sure you go out and grab Top Biller if you haven't already. I know, Steve, you got a Facebook group in here as well, correct?
Yeah, there's a free Recruitment Mastery Facebook group. More than happy to share the link if you need it and want it.
Excellent. So make sure to reach out to Steve, connect with him on LinkedIn, check out his book, check out the Recruitment Mastery group on Facebook. Steve, thank you so much for hanging with me today.
A pleasure. Thank you.